Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Rachel Maddow, and here we take complex financial and global stories and break them down into insights you can actually understand. Make sure you hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because today we're diving into one of the most dramatic military events of Arsène Charlotte. Nope, a story so intense it reads like a modern action thriller. Menja, it all begins on the freezing morning of December, Arsène near the village of Vladimir Rivka, deep in southern Ukraine. Picture this, a blizzard howling at incredible speed, snow slashing across steep riverbanks, and temperatures plunging far below freezing. Amid this chaos, Lixer's Ton T-Basher's main battle tank, stripped down for this mission, moves slowly toward the Kazini Toret River. On paper, the crossing is only cheers feet wide, but in reality, it's extremely difficult. Steep banks, thick mud, and icy water that makes progress almost impossible. This narrow river would soon become the stage for one of the most challenging operations in modern times. Ban Russia's solution was unusual, to say the least. Engineers welded half an old steel bridge to the top of the T-Basher chassis. Wooden planks were added like a makeshift platform, and the whole vehicle was wrapped in a protective steel cage designed to reduce detection. Imagine a massive top-heavy machine barely holding together, ready to face any problem but very unstable. The cost? Millions of dollars. The result? A risky improvisation by late Arsène Charlotte. The available specialized engineering equipment was mostly gone. Their plan had become simple but extremely risky. Use a tank to cross a small river. Expensive, delicate, and likely to face major difficulties. And yet, amid the blizzard, the commanders thought the weather gave them an advantage. Little did they know, the other side had been watching closely for days. MNDL Ukrainian intelligence tracked the convoy for nearly 4 days. From concealed positions, teams observed the T-Basher's movement. They knew exactly where it would attempt the crossing, and they had a detailed plan. At Wu-Ling-A.M, the blizzard reached its peak. Russian commanders ordered the convoy forward. They believed the storm made them undetectable. Meanwhile, Ukrainian operators prepared their countermeasures, launching small drones low to the ground, using the terrain and snow as cover. The first attempt was subtle. 4 reconnaissance drones were sent. Sensors detected them, causing most to fail. Russian crews cheered, thinking they had won. But this was only the beginning. Minutes later, new drones resistant to interference were sent to target the tank. These drones hit the protective cage and engine, disabling key systems. The T-Bashers moved forward, smoke rising. As the crew struggled to control it, the tank pressed on, a critical mistake. As it reached the riverbank, the added bridge structure shifted. Mud gave way. Then came a decisive impact. A drone struck a weak joint, destabilizing the whole vehicle. In slow motion, the massive tank toppled into the icy river. The bridge broke. Water flooded the vehicle. Behind it, the convoy stopped. Vehicles couldn't move forward or back. Artillery, already prepared, fired at precise coordinates. Fuel supplies were damaged, and the operation was paralyzed. This wasn't just the loss of a tank. It was a loss of planning, progress, and momentum. Forces in the region had to reroute supplies, planned movements were canceled, and units went defensive. Meanwhile, images of the wreckage circulated widely, showing the challenges faced. This incident became a study example almost immediately. Modern operations aren't about who has the biggest machines, but who combines strategy, observation, and precision. One side spent a small amount preparing, the other side lost a large investment, and more importantly, time. The main lesson is clear. Adaptability beats rigidity. One side improvised because it had to. The other adapted because it planned carefully. That frozen river crossing symbolizes how old methods can struggle when new approaches are applied. No matter how strong your equipment, if the strategy is flawed, problems follow. By Wu-Am, Ukraine was ready to escalate. Russian commanders, convinced their electronic warfare supremacy had rendered the skies safe, didn't notice the real threat lining up beneath the blizzard. First, Ukraine deployed 6 decoy drones. These weren't lethal. They were bait. Bright infrared emitters, loud radio signatures flashing like sirens to the Russian sensors. created the illusion of a massive assault overhead. The effect was immediate. Russian crews mistook these cheap decoys for a full-scale aerial attack. Panic set in. Shotguns, rifles, and tracer fire lit up the snowstorm as troops attempted to engage imaginary swarms. Every trigger pull acted like a flare, illuminating their positions in the blizzard for Ukrainian thermal optics. The chaos created a dangerous feedback loop. The more they fired, the more visible they became, turning the snow-covered battlefield into a gallery of glowing silhouettes. Meanwhile, the T-Bashers Bridge tank continued its slow, mechanical crawl across the frozen riverbank, unaware of the trap forming around it. And then came the main strike. The Wild Hornets, a fleet of high-speed, heavy-payload Ukrainian drones, swooped in just arser's feet above the snow. These weren't toys, they were precision tools designed for surgical destruction. They weave between tracer fire and gun smoke, exploiting gaps left by the Russian obsession with the decoys. The first wave struck MTLB recovery vehicles along the riverbank, triggering massive fireballs. Snow turned to orange flame as armored vehicles were lifted and destroyed. The roar of explosions echoed through the blizzard, and the air was filled with smoke, sparks, and melting metal. Without these recovery anchors, the Lickiters-ton T-Battersbridge tank was dangerously exposed. Yet, the Russian commander, blinded by hubris, ordered it forward. Imagine a multi-million-dollar vehicle crawling inch by inch across mud with no protection, under constant threat from unseen drones, while the storm obscured the horizon. Moscow had effectively placed all its bets on a single improvised machine, a mechanical Frankenstein that could collapse under the slightest miscalculation. Remember, the Russians tried to salvage the operation. Fiber optic drones, immune to radio jamming. Fiber optic drones, immune to radio jamming, provided a detailed CK view of the bridge tank's progress. The tank's hydraulic arms strained as steel spans were pushed forward inch by inch. The crew, convinced they were executing brilliance under pressure, ignored the signs of impending failure. The bridge structure reached 200% deployment, the armored convoy revving its engines behind them, ready to cross. Victory appeared just out of reach, but only barely. Meanwhile, Ukrainian operators exercised patience with military precision. They didn't need to overwhelm the Russians with sheer numbers. They waited for physics to do the work. The plan was simple in theory, but terrifyingly effective. Allow the tank's top-heavy structure to reach a point where its center of gravity was fully exposed and its hydraulic hinges were bearing the full weight of the steel bridge. At that exact moment, the strike would hit. This is strategy on a different level. Ukraine let overconfidence, engineering limitations, and the laws of physics combine into a weapon. The T-Bashers crew, believing in their invincibility, was unknowingly walking into a trap meticulously designed over days. Every movement, every inch the bridge extended was being tracked. Every creak of steel under strain, every shudder from the frozen mud was accounted for by operators who had rehearsed this scenario in simulators and real-world drills. The storm itself became an ally. Snow and wind masked the drone's approach, reduced visibility, and created acoustic confusion. The Russian troops, fixated on the decoys, had no idea that the Wild Hornets were circling, waiting for the critical moment. One wrong judgment, one hesitation, and the consequences would be catastrophic. The precision strike wasn't just about destruction, it was about timing, physics, and exploiting human error. Damnance. By combining patience, ingenuity, and technology, Ukraine had transformed a simple river crossing into a test of nerves and mechanics. It wasn't brute force that would decide the outcome, but the subtle interplay of gravity, leverage, and the relentless observation of skilled operators. The T-Bashers Bridge tank, so confident and imposing, was teetering on the edge of disaster, a few inches away from collapse, and when the final strike hit, there would be no room for error. This operation demonstrated a key lesson. Modern conflict isn't always won with bigger machines or heavier armor. Sometimes the smallest, most calculated interventions, decoys, drones, and timing can neutralize what seems unstoppable. It's a story of precision over power, patience over panic, and strategy over recklessness. The stage was set, the players were in place, and the consequences would be unforgettable. Woo, Star AM, the bridge tank had reached 500 Jolster Woo of its forward span. The Russian commander imagined medals, congratulations, and a swift crossing. Behind him, Sturvor vehicles waited, engines roaring, exhaust smoking. The path seemed clear, then came the final act. 3 fiber-optic-controlled Hornets, elite units immune to jamming and flying at Ebat Isar Marmpowers, approached. These drones weren't dodging shotguns or tracers, they were outrunning them. Their single objective, the hydraulic hinge connecting the bridge to the T-Basser chassis, the one point holding the massive forward weight. Impact was instantaneous. The first drone struck the hinge, triggering a massive thermal event. The second hit a secondary support cable. Ounce Disquaish 1 Halfer Hauer Seichens Nahader Sexton and Anakbower section. Physics did the rest. The bridge's forward section, now unsupported, collapsed. Steel snapped with a sound like a freight train colliding with a mountain. 60 tons of metal plunged into the Kazini Toret, burying the T-Basser chassis in mud until it stood nearly vertical. Catastrophic failure, 5 seconds flat, the convoy behind slammed brakes, engines roared, but there was nowhere to go. Their only path was blocked by their own collapsed machinery. The Russian commander stared at his screens in disbelief. The offensive had been stopped dead, not by massed armies, but by a handful of drones and a very long extension cord. Man, this wasn't just a tactical defeat, it was a logistical nightmare. The destroyed crossing froze the southern supply chain for weeks. Russia's momentum, built painstakingly over December, crashed into a wall of frozen mud. 15 MTLBs and support vehicles became sitting ducks, trapped behind a $1 million monument to failure. Economically, the results were brutal. Ukraine spent roughly BAB dollars in Lingon drones, destroyed over $T million in armored vehicles, and effectively neutralized an entire offensive. The return on investment is staggering, demonstrating the exponential advantage of high-tech precision over brute force. MD in this chapter shows the fusion of strategy, patience, and economics in modern warfare. Ukraine didn't just break a bridge, they froze an offensive, trapped equipment, and rewrote the battlefield calculus. The aftermath of this disaster is staggering. Russian forces were forced to reconsider their tactics immediately. To prevent further losses, they had to pull electronic warfare units from the front lines to protect rear logistics, weakening active offensives. Meanwhile, videos of the T-Batters Bridge snapping went viral, exposing desperation, improvisation, and poor planning on a global stage. Blend from a strategic perspective, one destroyed crossing had cascading effects. Entire southern supply lines were immobilized. Units across the river were effectively on isolated islands, waiting for supplies that would never arrive. This created a dilemma. Moscow had no easy solution for defend logistics or maintain offensive operations. Attempting both meant risking further catastrophic losses. Ukraine, on the other hand, leveraged technology, patience, and precision. They used minimal resources for maximum impact. Their strategy turned physics into a weapon. A single moment of perfectly timed execution immobilized an entire sector of Russia's army. Economically and militarily, this is textbook efficiency. BA dollars linked for drones to destroy T million of enemy hardware while halting operations for weeks. Blem Demba SPM MB is this disaster, highlights key lessons for modern warfare. Desperation engineering fails. Improvising top-tier equipment without adequate planning is a recipe for disaster. Welding scrap metal to $1 million tanks can't replace proper logistics. Precision trumps mass. Ukraine used smaller, cheaper units with surgical precision to dismantle larger, more expensive forces. Strategy and timing outweighed brute force. Ammia's psychology and hubris matter. Russian overconfidence in blizzard conditions and electronic warfare led them to underestimate their opponent. Hubris blinded judgment with catastrophic results. Demi economics of war are real. Cost-benefit calculations aren't just theoretical. They can define success or failure. Ukraine achieved a staggering return on investment that even financial analysts would envy. In short, Ukraine didn't just win a tactical victory, they reset the strategic balance in that sector. A single river crossing, destroyed with precision drones, turned the southern offensive into a logistical quagmire for Russia. The events at the Kazini Toret River are a stark reminder in modern conflict, technology, planning, and patience can outweigh brute force and improvisation. When the world is distracted by headlines or political theater, real battles are being decided with ingenuity, precision, and nerves of steel.